I'm really excited to share with everyone what I've been working on over the last year. At Portland State University, I get my slide share. There we go. We have an introductory probability and statistics course, what we call STAT 243 and 244. It is a non-math major course, and we service over 2,000 students annually. Courses are primarily taught by part-time adjuncts and graduate teaching assistants. This leads to many challenges, but one of the things we're seeing historically is large fluctuations in our DFW rates, so our DNF grades and withdrawal grades. Inconsistent coverage of content and how difficult the course is. Some are teaching it at a really advanced level when they shouldn't, or too easy at a level. Our students have a really wide range of background as well. This course, as far as prerequisites, only requires a college algebra course to enter, but that prerequisite math knowledge is very wide and varying. 44% of our undergraduates are first-generation college students, and so that has also been a challenge just to help them succeed. All levels, from freshmen to post-bac, mixed up in the class with all ages too. A variety of technology and study skills background, to nothing to a lot, and to try to incorporate that has been very challenging. Interest in the course. This course is for non-math majors. So most of these students, this is the only math class that they have to take for their major. It's required. A lot of them procrastinate, take it their senior year as like the spring of the last possible moment that they can procrastinate this course. Not to say that they're not all interested, but to keep their interest has been a challenge for sure. Our current textbook and online homework system was very expensive. We're up to almost $300. And even with negotiations, we can bring it down sometimes to $150. But again, we're trying to look at a resource for students that's under $50, if not free. Another huge thing for our university is that we're on quarters. Our 10-week quarter really restricts how much contact time we have with students, and our content just feels rushed constantly. That's the #1 complaint from students, is how fast we go, but we have a certain number of topics, especially for a sequence course. For the first half, you have to get through that sequence in order for them to succeed in the second quarter. So why use active learning? We looked at research, and I've been using active learning not really even knowing what active learning and their name for it for many years, and then kind of looking at this evolve over time. But we've seen that improves students' ability to retain information. Active learning provides student opportunities to exercise critical and creative thinking. Students perform better when they participate in the process. And that's a big one too. If they're actually engaged with this, it really changes what they take away from the classroom. It encourages other learning styles. So our physical, visual, verbal, and social learners can succeed maybe whether they wouldn't in a traditional lecture. It engages students with the material. And peer instruction is one of the best ways to solidify concepts. And then we also wanted to use the adaptive software piece of this when going through. And so why use adaptive software? Well, one of the things is timely intervention to catch students that are failing. Opportunities for reinforcing their knowledge acquisition. Provide students who fall behind multiple options for getting back on track. Takes into account students' prior knowledge. Assess student knowledge of subject in real time so they get immediate kind of feedback for that. And the flexibility as students move through the course at their own pace. We still have milestones that they have to hit, but how they get to that, they can go faster or slower. And with this active and adaptive approach, I have a great team in what we call the Office of Academic Innovation. So as far as our process, I was able to work with a group and look at kind of the high-level approach to how we can reimagine our curriculum to fit this new active and adaptive model. Here we are mapping out the course when we were first starting, when you're going through. We identified key concepts and made a hierarchical unit for each of our kind of weekly objects and how that would look within the system. I incorporated my own open source materials. I've written lots of stuff. I've made videos. I've also pulled in tons of other open source materials. This will keep the cost down for students as well. And then we further refined the course objectives and made a really interesting prerequisite network within the system, which is different than the course flow. So our prerequisite for something later on ties back into the system maybe from 3 or 4 chapters ago. So that was an interesting way to look at the curriculum that I've never looked at before. So our content is provided in multiple formats, and we really wanted to capture those different and accommodate those different learning styles and move away from that lecture. We embedded videos and files, assessment questions, all within one content page. So students are not going to a bunch of different sources. They can stay within the system. And that really helps students navigate the course successfully. So additional units and resources are automatically released after students complete certain milestones. We were looking at how we can make students accountable for prior knowledge, especially in this prerequisite map. And we decided on a 70% kind of grade threshold. That's our C- or better. But it's not just on a grade. We looked at a bunch of different things, but we're trying to think of if they don't complete unit 1 at a certain proficiency level, they shouldn't move on to unit 2 or unlock a worksheet that they don't know how to go through. And we really wanted to discourage the hunt and peck homework method where they only open up the homework and learn that one question from the book, get that maybe right or wrong, but move on to the next homework question without reading the textbook, without watching the lecture videos. So we decided on a composite grade that would be half on accuracy and half on completion with the 70% or higher to release content. And primarily this slide is mostly to think about the color coding scheme that we used. And it's not gamification way, but you can really visually see how you're doing in the course. The students can see and the instructor can see. And so if we're looking here, the top right corner, blue star, A, green, B, yellow is a C, red, we're getting into our D's and F's. Now, as far as the grading system here, they can constantly improve their grade, and the 70% or higher, so they can go back and actually always improve that grade itself. So for changes, what we're looking at here, primarily for our course at least, is that the majority of the lecturing and homework is now done online. And I didn't want to flip class. I tried that. I used Alex in a flip model and an Emporium model where they would watch a lecture and learn things outside of class time, and then they come and work on Alex inside the lab. And it never improved our passing rates. And so, you know, that's great for maybe some students. It wasn't working for our students. We only had a lab that sat like 120 students or something like that. We need to have a little, maybe a larger access or something of that sort. So the homework is still done offline, and what that does for us is it frees up our classroom time to focus on activities, worksheets, and simulations in mainly groups, small groups that we're working with. We hold them accountable. It's really important that they know that they need to do their work outside of class time so that they are prepared for those group projects we're going through. And then sometimes they're lost and we'll need to group back together. And I can use the real-time data analytics and how they're doing in class to say, oh, you know what, we need to lecture that day or at that moment in the time. Maybe a concept's difficult. I need to make sure that they're all on the same path. And then we'll go back and forth. We'll go back to the group project or back to a lecture. So I'm not getting rid of lectures. I'm just making the lecture a little bit more of what they need and catering it to what they're doing in class. So on the students' end, what I'm seeing with them is that they go into D2L. It's our learning management system, Desire to Learn. And previously, before this course, they would have sometimes up to 15 folders with subfolders, and we're hoping they start from top to bottom, but they've been having trouble navigating the course and finding where they should be at any particular time. And so we really simplified the look. They have 2 links, one to Realizeit homework, one to the discussion board. And as they click on that unit, they go right into the system. They don't have to navigate a front page. All of their content there, their lecture videos, their homework, everything is in this one page. And then once they complete that unit, that grade is pushed back to their D2L gradebook automatically. I don't have to do any double entry. And then that will release the next unit. So as they get that 70% or higher proficiency, the next unit is released or a worksheet is released. As a student goes into that first unit at the first time, it takes into their prior knowledge. So they get something called the determined knowledge, and it places them into the course. It'll ask them how well do they know the material, and it'll ask them a series of questions. And then if, let's say they're coming from an AP course from high school and they know this content really well, or the beginning of the chapter at least, they may not have any homework at all. And if they don't know it at all, they may have a little bit more homework. And we're not talking a huge amount of work, but again, I want to reward those students that already know the material and not have them repeat question after question when they already have the concept down. So after the student takes this determined knowledge, their view, it shows them how well did they do in that particular unit. They might, like in the first attempt, just from the determined knowledge, already have a C for that full unit. And then the learning map is down here on the bottom right-hand side. What this shows them is a navigation of each individual topic within the unit from left to right, and they have different pathways they can take. So let's say they're working at home and they get stuck on a pathway. They can always do an alternative step and do something else until they can get time to work with the tutor. And so on that student view, we've actually incorporated typed up lectures of the textbook. So this is an actual snapshot of the textbook as they're going through. But I've also embedded videos. So this is a video I made on the document camera. I expected them to watch this video, take notes, and then come to class. And I have done rewarding system a couple different ways. Like for instance, I checked that they had notes as they came into class, and they got an extra credit point towards their homework score at the very beginning of the quarter, so they know how important taking notes is. And you really almost have to change expectations for students and that hold that accountability. And it's hard to get them engaged right at the beginning and to have the buy-in, but I think they can see it once a couple weeks have passed. In the system, then we'll deliver the homework after they've watched the lecture and read the book. And again, reading the book, historically, my students never open the book. And so I really wanted to make sure that they've gone through it. They at least have to hit next. They don't have to read it, but they have to hit next and go through those pages. And then the type of questions are pretty robust, which is great. Here's a matching question where you drag and drop graphs over to their definitions. And then this was tied directly to an activity that we did in class. We have short answer and you can change rounding tolerances. You have algebraic equations. This particular one, it was a little bit more difficult, conditional probability. So I decided I'd give them 2 attempts, and on the second attempt to give them a hint. So these questions can be modified depending on what you're doing, but I chose to modify them to fit our curriculum. Once the students get done with their work and they see that they have actually improved on their grades, so they have this toggle between what's called the old and the new learning map from left to right. Right when they get done, they can see how they have improved visually. And then it will show them what's the next step or resume where they're at. And it nicely flows through the system itself. Then on the instructor view, I primarily use the analytics piece to change or actually catch at least students that are falling behind. In here, so I have a learning map of all of my students. For instance, here I can see on the left, this particular unit, 39 out of 40 have completed that first topic. But as I go far up to the right-hand corner, only 29 out of 40 have completed that last topic. And then it shows me an average grade by color, because you can see most of the classes getting C's with a couple of B's scattered in here. And I can look at this right before class and say, are they ready for an activity on modified box and whisker plots? So 29 of them, yes, maybe not all of them though. Also within the instructor view, I can quickly see how students are doing. So in a gradebook setting, I had to black out their names just to keep the privacy here, but each row on the bottom there is a student by unit on how they're doing in a grade. And this helps me catch those students that are falling behind or have just dropped out of the class. So I can quickly kind of visualize that this top student's getting an A. I have some B and C grades for the next student, but this last student, I'm worried they're going to fail the class. And I'm going to email them and try to get them caught up, say, hey, you were doing really well up to unit 4, and then you just haven't done anything. What's going on in your life? How can I help? Should you come to office hours? And they have no deadline other than the end of the term to get all this done. So they have been able to catch up, whereas previously they would have failed a quiz had a homework that's late, and then you never see them again until next quarter. The top graph I don't really use much until the end of the quarter, but that's just showing on the blue how much learning time over all the hours of all my students together by unit. You can see kind of peaks right around the midterm 1, midterm 2, and final exam score. But the visual on the grades has been wonderful. I can sort my grade book by weaker students and stronger students, or students that haven't started. So again, the names are blocked out here. I can see, as you know, if a student is getting, you know, a lower grade here, I can click on their learning map and specifically see where they're at. On the left, the yellow check is what the student is doing, and then the green dot right above the yellow, the small green dot, would be the class average for that particular unit. So I can see here that this student definitely isn't ready to do empirical rule in class that day. Maybe I should have a smaller group of these 4 weaker students together where I can help them a little bit more as the rest of the group moves forward because they're ready for the activity. Or usually what I do is I prompt them with an email saying, you know what, we have an activity tomorrow on empirical rule. You haven't looked at any of the content. Please try to look at that before class. And then I'm looking at my instructor view. One of my things I do every day before I go into class is this view on analytics. It just very quickly gives me a snapshot if everyone's through that particular unit. There's a lot going on in here. So if I'm looking, going through, is that the blue bar is how well they're doing in the particular unit. The black bar is knowledge covered. So did they cover it all? The green line is how much time they've spent in the system. And I've blacked out students' names. They're the ones in diagonal there. Those would be the student name. I left the guest account. That's my student view going in from the Desire to Learn platform. I can actually view this as a student through that guest account. And if I hover on any particular bar, it'll show me how well they're doing. And this unit, everybody's pretty much complete. I have a couple stragglers, but I'm pretty confident that I can go into this unit with an activity and everybody's going to understand it. And if I didn't see any activity here, I would be worried about them understanding what we're moving forward on. Now the time is just time the window's open, so you get these huge peaks in how long, like 1,000 minutes or something, is not how much time they've been in the system. I've talked with students and they just happen to leave their window open as they go and do something else. So you do have to be careful with like how much time, but if I see a huge amount of time and very slow progress, I might want to reach out to those students. So our active learning, what I was trying to get to is getting actually away from just a static worksheet. We do use them, but that's not my focus. With these group activities and worksheets, I don't want just a worksheet where an instructor say, get in your group and work on this worksheet, and it's dead quiet, and there's no talking going on, and everybody just completes their worksheet and moves on. And I'm seeing that, unfortunately, as a replacement of active learning. We really wanted to look at something tactile, kinesthetic learning. You know, how can we actually get students touching things, manipulatives? I've done a lot of simulations in class, making their own simulations or running through simulations that are already created. And really encouraging discourse, that the talking and the process through peer learning is very important. In statistics, at least, we're really focused on finding and using real messy data. I always am so discouraged when I see a sample size of 10 where you're trying to find a numeric statistic that comes out perfectly to the square root of 16. So if you were doing it by hand, old school, it's really easy to look at, but they don't really see how that ties into real world data. And that encourages that whole creative and analytical thinking. Data visualization and graphing also is really important, thinking about how we can incorporate that into our classroom. So again, we have these group worksheets, but there's this focus on making groups in a way that's effective, giving them a role. Maybe the weaker students are together and the stronger students are separate, or maybe you want one strong student with one kind of medium level student and one weaker student. So actually forming those groups in a thoughtful way, not just by who's sitting next to each other. The tactile part, we looked for activities, like this one is a matching game where they have pieces of paper that they're actually matching things and talking together in groups. Kahoot is a fun replacement for clickers. Clickers are expensive. We don't want the expense for it, but I do want to see how students are learning this. the Kahoot is kind of a gamification of a clicker, and it allows me to see where students are at and kind of gauge if they're understanding the material. And they get really competitive. I give away candy for this one. So the prize for them to win the Kahoot is a piece of candy, and they can actually get quite into it. We use lots of interactive simulations, and this is a math class, so again, I don't know if you can incorporate that into a non-math class, but with these simulations, we're truly trying to think about, we have a computer lab we're working in, and how can I get them on the computer and off of Facebook, but really kind of interacting with the material. So I'm walking around, I'm helping students. This is me helping a couple of my students out in the computer lab, walk through the activity. I get to answer questions right then. They don't have to wait for office hours later on, and I don't see students learning, reinforcing an incorrect topic. We use the graphing calculator in class. The graphing calculator has all sorts of other simulations you can do besides statistics, and we will do manipulators like rolling die, and you can actually simulate that on the computer as well if you don't actually have the die. Gapminder is a great way to do data visualization and get some real data. And I just never feel like my students are too old for candy. We use M&Ms and other candy as incentive to get them to working, looking at like goodness of fit of proportions and graphing with colors, or red dye taste testing, things of that sort. So it's been a really fun class. It is a lot more work, but it's so rewarding to get to know the students and walking around. So for preliminary results right now, this is in pilot stage. So I wanted to compare what I've been doing. I know my passing rates, my exams are going to be different than other instructors. I don't teach the course a lot. So my last two classes I taught for this preliminary one was in fall of 2015. It was a large emporium style. It was thinking of, well, it was half emporium, half lecture. So we would lecture one day and then we'd have a lab the other day. Passing rate was pretty dismal, 61% passing rate. Final exam score, C-. I taught the course the winter following term in a smaller section, and I improved that passing rate. So that was good to see that, you know, smaller class sizes definitely will help. I was just astounded though with this last pilot for spring, from 70 to 82% increase in the final exam score. That's the same final. I didn't change the exam, so there's no grade inflation going on here. And the passing rate from 61% to 77%. Again, this is a straight 90, 80, 70. There's no curve to my grades. And what I really love to see is that those B students are now A and the C students are B. So not only are they more passing, but they're passing at a higher level. And another interesting kind of side effect I've seen from this, because I get to work with students a little bit more intimately, and I'm checking in on them constantly with this analytics. This particular student, it's a Tuesday, Thursday class. We had a quiz coming up on Tuesday, and I noticed she hadn't done Unit 3. So I emailed her, you're really far behind in Stat 243. Can you meet Tuesday before class and see if I can help with getting you caught up? You should be starting Unit 4 tonight. And so this student's in danger of failing this quiz. They replied back on Monday. After reading your email, I have caught up to the near end of Unit 3. I will start Unit 4 before Tuesday's class. I'm available to meet before class on Tuesday unless you feel that is no longer necessary. Thank you for the nudge to keep going. So for this particular person, she didn't come to office hours. That freed up my office hour actually then for students that really needed it. And then I'm looking at this, this previously historically would be a student that would come in that Tuesday quiz, fail the quiz. I would grade it, hopefully get it back to them the following Thursday. And by that following Tuesday, if the student actually came to my office hours, they might come, but they've already had a flunking grade on their quiz. They're 2 weeks behind schedule. This student did well in my class, just with that little bit of nudge right from the beginning of the course. From what we've been doing, the student resources were needed. We took previous terms and we looked at how can we put resources out for students. For once, we actually had a common learning management system, D2L shell, that we copied to each course so students get the same feel. We created study plans for students. Faculty were added to enrich the problem bank so we had more problems. And then this also revealed that we really needed a faculty guide. So how can you actually implement this with faculty? This is the beginning stage. You notice the dates are just September. I started a Google Drive for my other instructors to log in here and get example exams and worksheets and activities and the open source book and all these other things that we're looking at. And then from here, I'm looking at also from my pilot, how can I adapt the course? So this is a fun way to look at how students progress through your course. It's called the course replay. And the x-axis here is the day of the course. So as the days progress, you'll see how much content covered by student. Each student is a dot. So as we go through here, we're looking at a herd of people kind of following the due dates, but some of these students will shoot up and finish the content within 2 or 3 weeks. They were done. That was interesting to see how fast some of these students progressed this course, but you see everybody kind of moving along at the same speed. Now right about here in a few days, you're going to on the bottom left see a blue dot just shoot up all of a sudden, and that student that right there, I caught them and said, you know what, you can still do this. You can pass the class. The final exam is 35% of their grade. And I haven't changed that percent overall for years. And they have to pass the final to pass the course. And they were discouraged and had given up. And I said, you complete all of your homework, you can totally pass that final and you can pass this class. It's not going to be a problem. So I've taken like how fast students work through the course. For instance, here, this was taken at the very first week snapshot of how students going in the course. And I was so pleased to see how everybody had finished chapter 1 the first week. I didn't expect them to finish chapter 2. That was just outstanding. But now I'm thinking about like, well, if they can finish chapter 2 in the first week, maybe we should push that because that's easier content. And I can then slow down from my chapter 5. And anytime I get to like discrete probability distributions, it's a huge headache for them. And they're always doing historically low with those course grades at that point. Maybe I should spend more time. So we're trying now to think about how we can change that curriculum based off these analytics. So the analytics are used in so many different ways. They're used like during the class to catch students, during activities, and then also for future courses. So it's been really fun. It's a lot of work. It's a ton of work, but it's so rewarding. And getting to know students and seeing that success rate has been just, it's been great. So.